Prologue. In 1814, a man named Pierre-Simon Laplace proposed the existence of a demon that knows the precise location and momentum of every atom in our universe. Based on the movements of all of the vast bodies of the universe down to the smallest particles, this being would be able to calculate for certain everything that will ever happen until the end of time. This implies that anything we do at any point in time is already determined on a set path and nothing will ever change that. Some people disagree with the idea that everything is already set in stone and that there are flaws with the very idea of it. We'll never know which idea is correct. The only one who can really say for certain is Laplace's demon. That's neither here nor there though. The question at the moment is this. If Laplace's demon is vast enough to calculate the exact positions of all items in the universe using simple classic mechanics, couldn't this creature also transport atoms from one place to another within the universe in the blink of an eye if it so desired? If it had that ability, then an even greater question is why bother? Chapter 1. I felt the frigid air whipping through my long hair. The tip of my nose was already sore from wiping it against my palm a few too many times and my eyes were watering. All of that wasn't nearly as rough as the chill running through my chest and my toes, which I couldn't even feel anymore. It was the middle of May last I checked, not yet super hot outside but at the same time no longer winter weather. That was why I decided to throw together a light outfit. Looking back, I wish I would have at least brought a hoodie or even better yet a full-on winter coat. After all, I was standing in the middle of a field surrounded by trees and an endless layer of snow. Hey Mari, the wind is picking up. I think we need to find some shelter before the weather gets worse. The guy behind me is Drake Edwards, an old friend of mine. We used to hate each other because we both liked the same girl when we were younger. She was like a beautiful shining star in our school and I was always full of myself back then because she was my best friend. All the guys liked her but she usually kept them all at arm's length, until she started hanging out with Drake. The guy was always so nonchalant and bland, basically downright apathetic, and it pissed me off. Although, most people said I acted the same way. Maybe that's why we always understood each other so well. But then the girl we were both in love with started dating some other guy out of nowhere and we were completely shocked and devastated. I'm sick of both of you acting like I'm the prize of some competition or something. You start competing with each other like it's some game and then ruin the mood every time we hang out. She got so upset she even started crying. To be honest, I learned a lesson that day about how careless I'd been acting. Drake and myself needed to be humbled, I think. We were young and had no idea how to impress a girl. I say that even though I myself am a girl. That had turned into us trying to one-up each other to the point that it all backfired. I wished I would have stopped and reflected on how my words and actions affected others a bit more back then. If I had been a more kind person, then I would have more than one friend. But alas, the only real friend I've had since back then is Drake Edwards. Alright, I responded, my voice more or less drowned out by the wind. My teeth were chattering so bad that my jaw was getting tired. Drake was pretty much wearing the same level of clothes as me with the exception of his steel-toe leather boots, which I was at the moment feeling extremely jealous of. I took a step and fell right on the spot into the snow. My shoes were made of a thin cloth and they were absolutely soaked from the snow at this point. About 30 minutes ago we were both on the couch in my living room playing Devil 3 Feet, a video game where you make a character and travel through different levels taking down monsters. Throughout the day I kept peeking over to see an unusually frustrated expression on Drake's face. I could tell he was upset over something but he didn't talk about it and I didn't press him. It wasn't until we were about to leave that he started to explain what was bothering him. That was when it happened, however. I was in the living room 1 second and then bam. Next thing I know I'm standing in the middle of nowhere freezing my ass off. I turned around and saw Drake with his red hair just looking at me all confused. To be fair, I probably had the same confused look on my face as well, but the only thing I could think at the time was, how did I get here? Why is it so cold? What's going on? And after about 20 minutes of that we started walking, but then Drake pointed out that the wind was picking up and saying we should get to cover before it gets really bad, but then my frozen feet gave out on me. I had not dressed for snow whatsoever. Despite not even knowing I would be in the snow, I still regretted not layering up regardless. The things Drake had been venting, his upset mood, all of that went out the window. I'd forgotten about it altogether at the time. It would have been a good idea to talk about that though, considering what would eventually happen as a result of leaving those feelings to fester. But that's a story for another time. Get up, you damn idiot, you wanna get frostbite laying down there in the snow or something? I looked up to see him holding his hand out to me. That pissed me off, so I just willed myself to stand on my own and put my arms in my sleeves and started trudging along. Where do you think we should go then, genius? There is no cover around here, also I'm wearing the thinnest shoes of all time, so I'm pretty sure frostbite is inevitable for me here. My vow to think of how my words and actions affect those around me slips up from time to time. Especially when I'm freezing to death and getting called an idiot for not preparing to get teleported to the North Pole at any given moment. There's tracks up ahead that seem to be directed that way. Our best bet is to follow them and see if we can get some help. Oh, turns out this guy can think on his feet even in a situation like this. I guess it's time to stop lamenting and get going. After all, the longer my feet are in this snow, the worse it's going to get. It took a while, probably at least 40 minutes, but the tree line got thinner and from the distance I could see a huge stone wall with smoke coming out over the top. We followed around to see some guys dressed up like knights standing outside a tunnel. Halt. As we walked up, they pointed spears directly at us. I was shocked and confused, but I was so cold I didn't even care at that point. State your names and what business have you in Rosenfell? One of the guys was yelling like this was the military or something. This dude is on a power trip, I guess, literally the worst thing right now. I wanted to ignore the man, but the spear wasn't just for show. That thing was actually made out of metal and was sharp enough to stab me. I was so annoyed and disgusted at this weirdo pointing a weapon at me. Drake Edwards, and her name is Mary L. Dawn. We're just trying to warm up from the cold and borrow a phone if possible. A phone? The hell is that? The guy looked at us confused and we both looked back at him confused for a moment. Dude, are you playing games with us? Can't you see we're freezing out here? I practically hissed at him. It was hard to sit here chatting while the cold wind was sending chills through my whole body. If you want to enter town, then use the main gates. Where might that be? Drake hid it well, but I could definitely see a vein sticking out of his forehead while he wore that plastered-on fake smile. After another 30, maybe even 40 minutes, we walked alongside the giant stone wall until we arrived at a huge wooden door. There were even more guys in armor perched up on top that asked us the same thing as the other man earlier. After some deliberation, the men opened the massive wooden gates and let us into the town. Luckily, there were lots of people shoveling the snow from the main walkway, so at least my feet weren't submerged anymore. Now to heat up my body, mainly my feet, and dry these shoes off. We walked into a bar, restaurant sort of establishment. The rowdy atmosphere was a bit much, but it seemed like a good place to get out of the cold. I took a seat at one of the stalls and Drake sat across from me. I still couldn't feel my toes and I was worried about frostbite. I had been walking in the snow with regular shoes for over 2 hours, so what I really needed was to warm up next to a fire. What will the two of you be ordering? A middle-aged man had walked up to our table to take our order. It was strange that we weren't even given a menu to look at, but oh well. Do you have coffee or warm tea? I asked. Coffee is available, but it's our most expensive non-alcoholic drink. If you want to warm up, I'd recommend some ale. Unless money isn't an issue, of course. The man had a thick voice and a scruffy beard. How much? I asked. The ale is only 3 stone and coffee is 3 copper. He said matter of fact like. Stone? Copper? What the hell currency is that? Are we in another country or something? Getting teleported into a snowy field aside, I hadn't considered where I was in the world. This whole place feels very European, so if I had to guess, then that's where we are. Unfortunately, I don't have a passport or anything, so I'm not sure how to go about getting home. I began digging through my pockets and pulled out my wallet and some random scrap of paper. In my wallet was only about $15 in paper money. For the most part, one used debit and credit cards, so that was my plan. Looking around though, this place seems super behind on the times. I would be shocked if they even took Visa, and if my paper money was no good, then that means I can't buy anything. I felt a headache coming on. Do you take either of these by any chance? I held out my paper money and my credit card. Huh? What is it? He looked at my money with a raised eyebrow. The fact he didn't know what it even was did not put me at ease. What do you have in your pockets? I looked over at Drake and saw that he had already placed the contents of his pockets on the table. First off, unlike me, he had his phone on him. I saw him trying to call for help earlier, but he said he didn't get any signal at all. I'm assuming he still hasn't gotten any signal, or else he probably would have told me by now. He also had a pocket knife. It was the kind that flips out really fast when you push the lever. When he did that, the guy taking our order was amazed. Aside from the knife, all he had in his wallet was about $5 and some change, which totaled up to about 67 cents. And then he also had a random scrap of paper. Would this do us any good? Drake handed over his change. The man shook his head. This currency is too light. Even if you melted it down, it wouldn't make a full copper coin. That would be illegal anyways. And the silver change is obviously not actually silver, therefore it's not worth much. The man shook his head apologetically. Drake frowned. This was looking like it would be a rough night. Where are we? I asked that broad question after a bit of silence. The tavern is called the Lady Hina, and the town is called Rosenfell. He stated. What country is this? I asked. Rosenfell is the southernmost town in the kingdom of Wallenheim. The man raised an eyebrow as if to say, are you really that lost? Wallenheim? I've never heard of it, have you? I looked over at Drake, but he didn't seem to know it either. I don't know how you haven't heard of it. Wallenheim is one of the largest and most prosperous kingdoms in the world. There's only about 4 other countries that even compare. The man sounded exasperated, as if you were dealing with some pranksters or something. Well, that's just great. We have no idea where we are and we're broke, and to make matters worse it's freezing outside. I couldn't help but lament the situation. What do you think this is worth? Drake flipped out the pocket knife that had caught the man's interest earlier. Let's see. It is quite nifty. I can't seem to figure out how it works. It's not exactly good for battle, but easily portable and sharp enough to cut rope. And if I can figure out how it works, I can make a fortune. I heard him mutter something like that under his breath. How about I give you each a meal and put you up for the night at the inn across the street? It was so unexpected my jaw probably hit the floor. Drake was most likely just as surprised. All that for a pocket knife? Are you sure? Ouch. What was that for? Drake was obviously not thinking clearly, so I kicked his shin under the table. Don't question his decision, just roll with it, dude. Thank you very much. I gave the man my biggest smile while Drake rubbed his shin, saying, you didn't have to kick me. Or something. Sealbert was an employee at the Lady Hina, and he was sure he had just hit the jackpot. Earlier that day 2 strangers had walked into the tavern where he worked. Both of them looked very unusual from the clothes they were wearing, light clothing that he had never seen before. One of them was a man that had the eyes of a warrior. He had red hair that faded into purple tips and a well-kept beard. He was taller than most men and well-built to boot. The woman with him was the real eye-catcher though. As soon as she walked inside, just about every man in the building began to ogle her. She had beautiful long black hair and piercing emerald green eyes. Her skin was pure white like porcelain, and even though she wasn't exactly well endowed in the chest, the clothes she was dressed in served to emphasize her slender figure. Her eyes and expression were cold and little bit scary, but that only made her even more attractive somehow. She looked like a princess. Sealbert was sure she had come from some form of royalty. He didn't want to get involved in whatever problems she had gotten caught up in, so he decided not to even bring it up. The 2 were so lost that they didn't seem to even know which country they were in. They had some strange items and unrecognizable currency. But when the knife was offered to him, he knew he had to have it. They were so ignorant of where they were that they probably had no idea how much they could make with something like that. It was an investment he couldn't give up. After all, 2 meals and a night at the inn across the street was barely even a single shift's worth of money out of his pocket. Sealbert even sweetened the deal by introducing the 2 strangers to one of the local farmers that could employ them so that they could make some money. The strangers were so thankful. The girl had smiled at him and his heart skipped a beat. The next day he would take this knife to the local blacksmith, have him figure out how to mass produce these knives. Then they would strike a deal and get in with a merchant to make enough money that they would never have to work again. All for about a day's worth of pay at his lousy job. Life sure is sweet sometimes. Sealbert walked down the road with a huge smile on his face.